We have a great set of passages for today. The call of Samuel, the great leader of the Hebrew people, and the call of the disciples. They're fitting passages as we celebrate the work of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who followed God's call to strive for peace and justice and equality in our country. A great man who did amazing things. If we sum up his ministry, there's one highlight that I think all of us remember. The most vivid public expression of his teaching in one speech that most of us have heard at least in part at some point. Anyone? I have a dream, right? His most famous speech, one of the most famous, if not the most famous speeches ever given, broadcast around the country and around the world. And it's a speech that galvanized a nation to move towards equality. It changed the world. And an amazing burden for the people of that time.
So even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will they be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream. My 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day, down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. When we allow freedom to reign, when we let it reign from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Great words that changed a nation, that affected all of those who heard it. Again, probably the most famous speech of all time. The thing is, though, that it was the great speech that almost never happened. About 10 years ago, because I was going into this profession, I'm kind of interested in public speakers. And someone gave me a Christmas present of a collection of the most famous speeches of all time. Of course, I Have a Dream was one of them. The thing is, I had never heard the whole speech before. The whole speech is about 17 minutes long. I cut it down here to about 5 minutes that we had. And that's the 5 minutes that most of us know. That's the last 5 minutes of the speech. There's another 10 to 12 minutes that come before it. And the thing is, it's not very good. It's really not. The true story behind that speech is tens of thousands of people gathered together in front of the Lincoln Memorial. There were other speakers, other singers that stood and addressed the crowd. Martin Luther King was the keynote of that address. He stood there and he began his written speech, and it wasn't good. It meandered, it was dry, and he was losing the crowd. But the story goes that someone else had heard him say something about this "I have a dream" part. He wasn't prepared to speak on that day, but someone standing behind him who realized the crowd was meandering, he was losing the crowd, said, "Martin, tell him the dream part." And more than that, if you notice, as he's speaking, did you hear specifically one woman in the background that, in very traditional African-American style, was saying, well, that woman is Mahalia Jackson. Now, she's a gospel singer that you may know, who was there to sing for the crowd. She realized that Martin was losing the group. So she started egging him on. She started encouraging him. And the thing is, the louder Mahalia got, the better Martin got. And as she continues to encourage him, he goes off script and he just starts speaking from his heart. And that address turns into one of the greatest speeches of all time. That never would have happened had Mahalia not been there yelling into Martin's ear. It's a great lesson for us as we hear about all these great figures in the Bible who have been called by God to great and extraordinary things. Because so often we feel ill-equipped. We feel like we can't do those great things like the disciples or like Samuel or do God's work in those great mighty ways to follow in the lines of Martin Luther King and others who have stood publicly and made a difference in the world. Well, what we learn is that God calls all of us to His service. That all of us are important. Some of us are called to stand in that podium, to make that address to the entire world. Others, we're called to be Mahalia, to stand behind and to support and encourage others so that they can make that difference. No less important to be that support person. Look back at our first lesson. Samuel, who went on to do great things, never would have found God's call had it not been for Eli, who helped him. Nathanael never would have come to Jesus had it not been for Philip. God calls each and every one of us to service. God calls each and every one of us to stand up and make a difference in the world. It doesn't necessarily have to be in great public gestures that all the world sees. It can be in those quiet, seemingly insignificant things that make all the difference that no one notices. Each and every one of us have been called to do nothing less than to change the world in our own way. God is speaking to each of you. God is calling each of you to service in big things and in small things. Listen to that call. Answer. Say, "Here I am." Amen.